The rain had been falling for hours before she ever saw the lights of the town. It came down hard across the empty western road, turning the dirt into thick, muddy tracks that swallowed the wheels of her old car. The windshield wipers fought uselessly against the storm, dragging left and right like they were tired too. Like everything in the world had decided to slow down except her fear. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. She didn't know exactly how far she had driven, only that she had to keep going, away from the past, away from the names she refused to think about, away from the mistake that had finally become too dangerous to ignore. The gaslight blinked once, then again, and then stayed on. No, not now, she whispered, her voice barely louder than the rain hitting the glass. Ahead, a faint glow appeared through the storm-warm, yellow, almost unreal. A town, small, quiet, the kind of place that looked forgotten by time itself. She didn't have a choice anymore. The car rolled into the empty main street, tires splashing through puddles. Wooden buildings lined both sides, their porches dark, signs swinging gently in the wind. A diner, a closed general store. A motel with one flickering light. It looked safe, but she had learned long ago that safe was just another word people used before everything fell apart. The engine coughed as she pulled into the nearest open spot beside a dimly lit gas station. It was barely open, just one pump still working under a rusted metal canopy. The station's light buzzed overhead like it was struggling to stay awake. She turned off the engine. Silence hit her instantly. For a moment, she just sat there, staring through the rain-streaked glass. Her reflection looked like a stranger. Wet hair, tired eyes, a face that had stopped trusting the world a long time ago. Just one night, she told herself. Then you move again? But even as she said it, she didn't believe it. She stepped out of the car, cold air rushing against her skin. The rain soaked her instantly, heavy and relentless, as if the sky itself was warning her to turn back. She pulled her coat tighter and hurried toward the small office beside the pump. The door creaked when she opened it. Inside, it smelled like old coffee and dust. A single lamp lit the counter. Behind it stood a man. He didn't look surprised to see her. That was the first thing she noticed. Tall, still, calm in a way that felt almost unnatural. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms marked by years of work. His eyes lifted slowly from a worn ledger to meet hers, and in that brief moment something shifted. Not warmth. Not welcome. Something heavier. Like recognition without memory. You're closed? She asked, wiping rain from her face. He looked at the storm outside, then back at her. Depends. On what? On whether you're staying or just passing through? Her breath caught slightly at the question. It felt too accurate, too close to something she didn't want to admit. I just need fuel, she said quickly. He studied her for a second longer than comfortable. Then he nodded once. Pump works, you can fill up. She should have left it. At that, paid left, disappeared into the night like she always did, but as she turned to go back outside, her legs betrayed her for just a second. Weak from exhaustion, hunger, and days of running on nothing but adrenaline. The man noticed. Course he did. You're not just tired, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. She stopped. The rain outside hit the roof harder, as if the world was leaning in to listen. I'm fine, she lied. He didn't argue, didn't push. Instead, he stepped out from behind the counter, walking toward the door. You won't make it far tonight in this storm, he said. She looked at him sharply. I didn't ask for help. I know, he replied. That was the problem, because somehow the way he said it didn't feel like pressure. It felt like understanding for the first time in a long time. She didn't know what to do with that. Outside, thunder rolled low across the sky. The wind shifted, pressing against the windows like it wanted inside, and in that quiet, forgotten gas station, two strangers stood on opposite sides of something neither of them could name yet. Something that was about to change everything. The rain didn't let up. It pressed against the windows of the small gas station like it had nowhere else to go, like it wanted to stay there and listen. Inside, the hum of the old lamp filled the silence between them, two strangers standing too, close to a moment neither of them had asked for. She stood near the door, still deciding whether to leave or not. He stood behind the counter, watching her like he was trying to solve a problem that didn't want to be solved. Neither of them moved first. Finally, she broke the silence. "I said I just need fuel," she repeated, firmer this time, as if saying it twice could make it more true. He leaned slightly on the counter. "And I said you can have it." That surprised her. Most places she had been lately came with questions. Too many questions. Too many eyes trying to read her like an open book she didn't want anyone to touch. But this man didn't ask. That almost made him more dangerous. She turned slightly toward the window again. "Then why are you still talking to me?" A pause. He looked at her, really looked at her this time. Not at her clothes. Not at the rain soaking her hair. Not at the exhaustion in her posture. At her eyes. "Because people don't end up in storms like this by accident," he said quietly. Her chest tightened. She hated how accurate that felt. Outside, thunder rolled again, deeper this time, shaking the glass. "I don't need a lecture," she said, sharper now. "I'm not giving you one." "Then what are you doing?" He hesitated just for a second. That hesitation told her more than words ever could. "I'm making sure you're not about to collapse in my parking lot," he said finally. Silence stretched between them again. This time she didn't answer. Because he wasn't wrong. She had been running for so long that her body had started to forget what rest felt like. Every step forward had been survival, not living. And now, standing in a warm-lit room with a stranger who didn't look away from her pain, it felt unfamiliar, unsettling. She turned back toward the counter, fully now. "I can handle myself." "I don't doubt that," he replied. That was what made him different. He wasn't challenging her strength. He was simply noticing it and still not being impressed by it. That irritated her more than she expected. She walked closer to the counter, placing a few wet bills down with shaking fingers. "Fuel, that's it." He glanced at the money, but didn't touch it yet. Instead, he said, "You're new around here. It wasn't a question." She sighed. "I'm passing through. Everyone says that." "Because it's usually true." This time he actually let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "Not here," he said. That made her pause. "Why?" He finally moved, stepping out from behind the counter. His boots made soft sounds against the wooden floor. He was closer now, close enough that she had to tilt her head slightly to keep eye contact. "Because this town doesn't get many people running from things," he said. Her stomach tightened. "I'm not running from anything," she said quickly. A lie again, but he didn't call it out. Instead, he nodded slowly, like he had heard that exact sentence before, maybe from other people, maybe from himself. "All right," he said. "Just that. All right, no argument." No push. That unsettled her more than suspicion would have. He walked past her toward the door leading outside. "Tank's around the side." "I'll turn the pump on." She followed him with her eyes, unsure why she didn't just leave while she had the chance. But something held her there. Maybe the storm, maybe exhaustion, or maybe the fact that for the first time in a long time, someone wasn't trying to force her to explain herself. He opened the side door, letting a rush of cold wind and rain sweep inside for a moment. Then he paused, glancing back at her. "You staying in town tonight?" he asked. "I don't know," she answered honestly before she could stop herself. That made him study her again, longer this time, like he was deciding something he hadn't planned on deciding. Finally, he said, "There's a room above the station, if you need it." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why would you offer that?" He shrugged, as if the answer was simple. "Because the storm's getting worse." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Another silence. This one heavier. She should have said no. She knew that. Every instinct she had told her to stay moving. Staying meant risk. Staying meant attachment. Staying meant being found. But her body betrayed her before her mind could decide. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Not curiosity, not suspicion, something older, something tired. "Neither do I," he replied. And then he stepped out into the rain, leaving her standing in the quiet glow of the gas station with a question she didn't know how to answer, Why did safety feel more dangerous than the storm outside? The storm didn't just continue, it deepened. Wind slammed against the side of the gas station like something alive, shaking the thin walls and rattling the old metal roof. The world outside had turned into a blur of rain and darkness, as if the town itself was being erased one drop at a time. She stood near the window, watching him outside. He moved with steady purpose in the storm, walking toward the side pump, shoulders slightly hunched against the rain. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate. It was the kind of calm that came from someone who had learned not to argue with nature or life. A moment later, the pump light flicked on. Fuel began to flow. He disappeared back toward the station entrance, pushing the door open with a firm shoulder. Cold air rushed in again, followed by him soaked, steady, unchanged by the weather. He wiped rain from his face once, then looked at her. "Tank's ready," he said simply. She nodded, forcing herself to move. Anything to break the tension building inside her chest. Outside, she filled her car in silence. The rain soaked her again instantly, colder now, sharper. Every drop felt like a reminder that she didn't belong anywhere long enough to get dry. When she finished, she stood there for a moment, staring at the fuel nozzle in her hand. Leave. That was the plan. Get back in the car, drive, disappear, but when she looked toward the station again, she saw him standing in the doorway, watching, not forcing, not calling her back. Just there, waiting. That made it worse, because no one ever waited for her without wanting something. She returned the nozzle, then walked inside again. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The air inside felt warmer now, almost too. Still after the storm. The hum of electricity, the smell of old wood and rain, it all wrapped around her like a space she didn't belong in but couldn't easily escape. He was behind the counter again. She hesitated near the entrance. "I'll pay and go," she said quickly, as if she needed to convince herself more than him. He nodded once. "Okay." Again, no resistance. That silence between them started to feel different, not empty, not cold. Controlled, like something was being held back on both sides. She placed the remaining cash on the counter. He didn't count it immediately. Instead, he said, "Storm's not letting up for hours." "I'll manage. You said that already?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why do you care?" That question lingered in the air longer than anything else had. He looked at her for a moment, then leaned slightly on the counter. "I don't," he said honestly. That should have ended it. But it didn't, because the way he said it didn't sound like indifference. It sounded like someone who had stopped trusting himself to care too much. She looked away first. "I don't stay places," she said quietly. "I noticed." That made her glance back at him. There it was again, that calm observation, no judgment. Just awareness. The storm outside hit harder, as if trying to remind them the world still existed beyond the thin walls. Lightning flashed briefly through the windows, turning the room white for half a second. And in that flash, everything felt closer, too close. She shifted slightly, uncomfortable with how aware she suddenly was of the space between them, the small room, the single counter, the fact that there was nowhere to go without passing him, he noticed. Of course he did. "You can wait upstairs if you want," he said again, quieter this time. "I said I don't stay," she replied. "And I heard you." Another pause. Then, unexpectedly, he added, "Staying isn't the same as stopping." That made her freeze slightly. She didn't answer immediately, because something about that sentence didn't feel like persuasion. It felt like understanding something she hadn't said out loud. Thunder rolled again, longer this time, vibrating through the walls. She looked toward the stairs behind the counter, then back at the door, then at him. For the first time, she noticed something in his expression shift, not openness, not invitation, but restraint. Like he was used to people leaving, and had learned not to stop them. That realization stayed with her longer than she expected. "I just need a few hours," she said finally, almost unwillingly. He nodded once. "Take them." She hesitated. Again, then slowly stepped inside. Each step toward the stairs felt heavier than it should have. Not fear, not trust, something in between. Halfway up, she paused and looked back down at him. He was already back behind the counter, pretending to organize something that didn't need organizing, but she could feel it. He wasn't ignoring her, he was giving her space, which somehow felt more intimate than attention. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. He didn't look up immediately. When he did, his answer was simple. "Because the storm's worse than it looks." She frowned slightly. "Outside?" He held her gaze. "No," he said quietly. "Inside people." And just like that, the air between them changed again, heavier, quieter, filled with things neither of them were ready to say. She didn't respond. She just turned and continued upstairs. But for the first time since she arrived in town, she didn't feel like she was running from the storm outside. She felt like she had just walked into one she couldn't see yet. The stairs creaked softly beneath her steps. Each one sounded louder than it should have in the quiet building, like the station itself was aware she was crossing into a place she didn't belong. The upstairs hallway was narrow, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb that buzzed faintly above her head. There were only 2 doors, one slightly open. She pushed it gently. The room inside was small, simple, and unexpectedly warm. A bed with a worn blanket, a chair by the window, a dresser that had seen too many years but still stood firm like everything else in this forgotten place. Rain tapped against the glass in steady rhythm. For a moment she didn't move. She just stood there, listening. Because silence like this was dangerous, it gave thoughts room to breathe. And she had spent a long time keeping hers buried. Finally, she closed the door behind her and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. Her body felt heavier now that she was still. Every muscle seemed to remember how long she had been running. "Just a few hours," she whispered to herself again. But the room didn't answer, neither did the past. She crossed to the window and looked out. The town below was barely visible through the storm, just soft shapes, blurred lights, and rain turning everything into motion. Somewhere down there, he was still in the gas station, alone behind the counter. That thought surprised her. She didn't know why she was thinking about him. He was just a stranger, a man who asked too few questions. And somehow, that was what unsettled her most. A knock at the door broke the silence. She turned sharply. "Yeah?" she called. The door opened slowly. It was him. He didn't step fully inside, just enough to be seen. In his hands, a folded blanket and a small metal cup. "I figured you might need this," he said. Her guard rose instantly out of habit. "I didn't ask for anything." "I know," he replied again. That simple phrase again. "I know." He stepped forward and placed the blanket on the chair near the window, then set the cup beside it. "It's just coffee," he added. "Nothing special." She didn't move. Neither did he. The space between them felt small, now smaller than it should have been for 2 people who barely knew each other. Finally she spoke. "Why are you being kind to me?" He paused at that. "Not surprised, just thoughtful." "I'm not," he said quietly. That made her frown. "Then what is this?" He glanced at the blanket, then at her. "Basic decency," he said. "People don't do it enough anymore, so it gets mistaken for something else." She almost laughed, but didn't. Because something about his answer didn't feel like a line. It felt like truth he had learned the hard way. The silence returned, softer this time, less defensive. She slowly walked toward the chair, but didn't sit. Instead, she picked up the blanket, holding it for a moment. It was warm. That alone almost made her stop breathing properly. When she finally looked at him again, her voice was quieter. "You don't know anything about me?" He nodded once. "True. That should matter." "It usually does." "And?" Another pause. This one longer. He leaned slightly against the doorframe, as if deciding whether to say something he usually didn't. "I stopped believing people are only their worst moments," he said. That landed differently, not like comfort, like recognition. Something in her chest tightened before she could stop it. She looked away first. The coffee steamed gently on the table. The blanket still warmed her hands. The room felt suddenly too real, too present. "I'm not safe," she said quietly. It wasn't a warning. It was honesty. He didn't move. I didn't say you were, he replied. That made her look back at him. There was no fear in his expression, no expectation either. Just stillness. Like he had decided not to define her at all. And that was worse than judgment, because it left her nowhere to hide. Outside, thunder rolled again, but farther away this time, like the storm was slowly losing strength. She finally sat down on the edge of the bed, still holding the blanket. He didn't leave immediately. Instead, he stayed in the doorway, not entering, not leaving. I should go, he said after a moment. She nodded slightly. Probably. But neither of them moved. The air between them felt different now, less like suspicion, more like awareness. Like something unspoken had quietly taken its first breath. He looked at her once more, then added softly, "Try to rest." It wasn't a command, not even advice, just a thought left behind. Then he stepped back and closed the door gently. The room fell into silence again. Morning arrived without announcing itself. The storm had finally weakened into a soft, tired rain, the kind that didn't demand attention anymore. It just lingered. Gentle drops slid down the window like the sky was exhaling after holding its breath all night. She woke slowly. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. That feeling alone was dangerous. Her eyes opened fully, and the small room came back into focus. The bed, the chair, the untouched coffee now cold on the table. The blanket was still in her hands, wrapped loosely around her like something she hadn't realized she needed. She sat up. The silence felt different from the night before. Less sharp. More lived. In outside, faint morning light filtered through the clouds, softening everything it touched. She stayed still for a while, just listening. No sirens. No footsteps chasing her. No sudden fear punching through her chest. Just rain. And quiet. It unsettled her more than chaos ever had. A knock came again. Lighter this time. Before she could answer, the door opened slightly. He was there again. Same calm presence. Same steady expression. But now, in daylight, he looked less like a shadow and more like a man who belonged to a place that didn't see many visitors. "I thought you might still be sleeping," he said. "I wasn't sure I should be," she replied honestly. That made him pause for a second. Then he stepped in, just enough to place a small plate on the table beside the coffee. Eggs, bread, nothing fancy. "Food," he said simply. She looked at it, then at him. "You always do this?" she asked. "Do what?" "Take care of strangers who don't ask for it." A faint, almost invisible shift crossed his expression. "No," he said, "just this once." That answer should have ended the conversation, but it didn't, because nothing between them felt like it had clean endings. She slowly got up from the bed, still holding the blanket around her shoulders. The room suddenly felt smaller with him in it, not uncomfortable, but aware, like the space had become shared instead of empty. "I can pay," she said. He shook his head. "It's already done." "That's not the point. I know." That phrase again? "I know." It was starting to feel like a habit. Not dismissive, not intrusive, just steady. Like he wasn't trying to fix her, only understand the parts she wasn't saying. She sat down at the table, but didn't eat yet. Instead, she studied him. Not openly. Not directly, the way someone studies something unfamiliar but strangely safe. "You didn't sleep much," she said quietly. He leaned slightly against the wall near the door. "I don't usually." "That's not healthy." A faint hint of something almost like amusement passed through his eyes. "You sound like you've known me longer than a night." "I don't know you at all," she replied. A pause, then softer. "That's the problem." Silence filled the room again. But it wasn't heavy anymore. It was different now. Shared. Outside. A few birds broke through the gray sky, their movement small but alive. The storm had left behind a washed, quiet world. She finally broke the bread in her hands without thinking, then another pause. "You could have just let me leave last night," she said. He nodded. "I could have. Why didn't you?" He looked at her for a moment longer than usual. Not searching, not judging. Just steady, because you didn't look like someone who needed another empty road. He said. That landed deeper than she expected. Her Fingers stopped moving. For a second, she forgot what she was doing. Then she looked down again, breaking the bread more slowly. "I don't stay anywhere," she said again, but this time it sounded less like a rule and more like something she had been forced to believe. He didn't challenge it. He just said, "People say that when staying has never felt safe." That made her go still, because it wasn't wrong, and she hated that he could see it. Without her explaining anything, the room felt warmer now. Even without sunlight, she finally took a bite of the food. Simple, ordinary, real, and somehow it tasted like something she hadn't had in a long time, not just nourishment, but normality, a life that didn't require running. He watched her quietly, then looked away, not staring, not intruding, just present. That should have made her uncomfortable. Instead, it did the opposite. It made her feel less invisible. After a while, she spoke again, softer. "What's your name?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then, "Daniel." She nodded slowly. "I don't have one you need to know." That should have sounded closed off, but it didn't. It sounded like history. Not refusal. Just distance. Daniel didn't press. Instead, he pushed off the wall slightly. "I should get back downstairs." She nodded again, but neither of them moved immediately. There was something sitting between them now, quiet, unspoken, and growing in ways neither of them was ready to name. Finally, he turned toward the door. The threshold, he paused. Without looking back fully, he said, "If you need anything, I'm here." Then he left. The door clicked softly behind him, and for a long moment, she just sat there in the quiet morning light, realizing something she didn't have words for yet. It wasn't the storm outside that had trapped her here. It was the first place she had ever stopped wanting to leave immediately. The day moved slowly, not the kind of slow that felt boring, but the kind that felt unfamiliar, like time itself had forgotten how to rush. Outside, the rain had nearly stopped, leaving behind a washed sky and damp earth that smelled like something new trying to begin again. Inside the gas station, everything felt quieter than before. Not empty. Just settled. She stayed upstairs longer than she intended. At first, she told herself it was only because she was tired. Then she told herself it was because she needed to think. But deep down, she knew neither excuse was fully true, because the truth was simpler and harder. She didn't want to leave yet. That realization sat uncomfortably in her chest, like something she hadn't agreed to feel. Downstairs, she could hear him moving occasionally, soft footsteps, the low sound of a drawer opening, the distant hum of the old refrigerator, normal sounds, safe sounds. That word again. Safe. She almost laughed at it, because nothing about her life had ever been safe for long. A knock came at the stairs again, not rushed. Not intrusive. Just present. "It's Daniel." His voice came through gently. "You all right?" She hesitated before answering. "Yeah," she said, "I'm fine." A pause. Then, "You don't sound like it." That made her close her eyes for a moment, because that was the problem. He wasn't pushing. He was noticing, and no one had noticed her, without wanting something in return for a long time. "I said I'm fine," she repeated, a little sharper this time. Silence followed. Then, quietly, "Okay." He didn't argue. He didn't come in. He just stayed on the other side of the door for a second longer, and then left. That should have been a relief. Instead, it left a strange ache behind. She sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. They were steady now, but she remembered when they weren't. She remembered nights without sleep, roads without direction, people whose faces blurred together because staying attached to any of them meant risk. Her life had become movement. Not living, just escaping, and now she wasn't moving. The thought frightened her more than anything outside ever had. Hours passed. Eventually, she forced herself to go downstairs, not because she was ready, but because staying alone with her thoughts was starting to feel heavier than facing him. The stairs creaked softly as she descended. He was behind the counter again, as usual, organizing something unnecessary, a habit, a distraction, or maybe just a way to stay grounded. When he saw her, he paused. Not surprised. Just attentive. "You came down." He said simply. "I needed air," she replied. He nodded once, like that made sense even if it didn't fully. She stood near the base of the stairs for a moment, unsure where to place herself in a space that still didn't feel like hers. Finally, she walked toward the counter. I don't usually stay anywhere more than a night, she said suddenly. The words came out before she could. Stop them. Daniel stopped what he was doing, didn't interrupt, didn't rush her, just listened. She continued, voice lower now, because if I do, things get complicated. Another pause. Outside, a soft wind moved through the empty street. I've learned complications usually end badly, she added. Silence stretched between them. Then he said quietly, that sounds like something you didn't choose for yourself. That hit differently. Not like sympathy, not like comfort, like understanding. She looked at him sharply. You don't know that. He nodded. You're right. That honesty again. No attempt to correct her. No attempt to fix her story. Just acceptance of what he didn't know, and somehow that made it harder to keep her distance. She leaned slightly on the counter, exhaling slowly. I don't trust places that feel calm, she admitted. Daniel studied her for a moment, then said, sometimes calm is just what's left after chaos stops winning. That stayed in the air longer than either of them spoke. She looked away first, because something inside her tightened, something she hadn't expected. A memory surfaced, not clear, not detailed. Just feeling, running, fear, silence that wasn't peaceful but empty. She swallowed hard. I'm not used to this, she said quietly. Being still? He asked. Being okay. That word felt foreign in her mouth. Okay. Daniel didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was softer than before. You don't have to be used to it to deserve it. That broke something, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a wall inside her, finally realizing it didn't have to hold so tight anymore. She looked at him. Really looked, and for the first time since she arrived, her expression wasn't guarded. It was tired. Human. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Daniel nodded slightly. Neither do I. That surprised her. The evening arrived quietly, as if the world was afraid to disturb what had begun to change inside the small gas station. The sky outside had cleared almost completely. Only thin streaks of gray clouds lingered, drifting slowly across a pale sunset. The rain was gone, but it had left everything softer-like. The earth itself had been washed clean and didn't know what to do with the silence afterward, inside. The light was warm, not bright, not harsh, just enough to make everything feel real. She stood near the window again, but this time she wasn't watching for escape routes. She was just looking at nothing in particular, at everything she had missed. While running, behind her, Daniel moved quietly behind the counter. Same steady rhythm, same calm presence. But now it didn't feel distant. It felt familiar in a way that unsettled her more than danger ever had. Because familiarity meant attachment, and attachment meant risk. A soft knock broke the silence, not from the door, but from his voice. You haven't eaten much today. Daniel said, I'm not hungry. She replied automatically. A pause, then his voice again, softer. That's not true. She closed her eyes for a moment. Of course he noticed. She turned slightly. Why do you always do that? Do what? See through things I'm trying not to say? He leaned lightly on the counter, watching her. I think it's because you're not very good at hiding them, he said gently. That should have irritated her instead. It almost made her smile. But the moment didn't last long, because something heavier was waiting behind. A silence stretched between them again, but this one was different. It wasn't empty. It was full of everything they hadn't said. She finally spoke, her voice lower than usual. I got a message this morning. Daniel's expression shifted slightly, not alarm. Just attention. She continued, it's not over. The words landed heavily in the room for a moment. Even the air felt still. Daniel didn't ask what it was. He didn't need to. That was something she noticed about him now. He didn't force details from her pain. He waited for what she chose to give, but this time she gave more than usual. I thought I lost them behind me, she said quietly. But I guess you don't really lose things like that. You just delay them. Her hands tightened slightly at her sides. I should leave tonight, she added. It came out like a decision she had already made in her head before saying it out loud. Daniel didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was calm but Heavier than before. Is that what you want? The question stopped her because it wasn't what's right. It wasn't what's safe. It was something simpler, something harder. What do you want? She looked at him. Really looked at the man who had not pushed her, not demanded explanations, not tried to fix her broken edges, only stood near them. Without fear, and that was the problem, because fear she understood, but this quiet safety? This presence that didn't try to take anything from her? It made leaving feel like losing something she hadn't even admitted she had found. I don't know, she admitted finally. Her voice cracked slightly on the words, and that alone scared her more than the message. Had Daniel stepped away from the counter slowly, not toward her, not away from her, just closer to the center of the room, like he was, giving the moment space to exist without pressure. You don't have to decide everything tonight, he said. I don't have a choice, she replied quickly. If they find me, she stopped herself, her breath tightened. The room felt smaller again, like the past had just stepped inside without opening the door. Daniel stayed still, then softly, Are you safe right now? The question hit differently. Not about tomorrow, not about consequences, just now. She hesitated. That hesitation was the answer. He nodded once, slowly. Then that's where you start, he said. Her eyes filled slightly with frustration, not at him, but at everything. I don't want to bring this into your life, she said. You didn't, he replied calmly. You arrived with it. That honesty made her flinch slightly, because it was true. She looked away. I ruined things, she whispered. The words escaped before she could stop them. A long silence followed. Then Daniel spoke, quietly but firmly. You're not a ruin, he said. You're a person carrying something heavy. That made her go still, because no one had ever said it like that. No blame, no judgment, just weight acknowledged. She felt something tighten in her chest. Again, different this time. Not fear, not panic, something closer to breaking. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. I don't know how to stop running. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, Maybe you don't stop all at once. A pause. Maybe you just stop for one night longer than you planned. That line stayed between them. Simple, dangerous, because it wasn't a demand. It was permission, and permission was far more terrifying than force. She stood there, frozen between two versions of herself, the one that ran, the one that wanted to. Stayed just long enough to understand what it felt like not to be alone. Outside, the wind moved gently through the quiet street. Inside, she finally whispered, I don't know what I'm choosing anymore. Daniel didn't move closer, didn't push. He only said, Then don't choose fear just because it's familiar. And for the first time since everything began, she didn't answer, because she realized the hardest battle wasn't the past chasing her. It was deciding whether she still wanted to keep running from the only place that felt like it might finally let her breathe. The night was quiet in a way that felt almost unreal. Not the silence of danger, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence that comes after something heavy finally stops pulling at the world. Outside the gas station, the last traces of the storm had fully disappeared. The sky was clear now, washed clean, scattered with distant stars that looked brighter than she remembered seeing in a long time. Inside, everything felt still, but not frozen, alive in a softer way. She stood near the window again, but this time she wasn't searching for escape. She was searching for certainty and finding none. Daniel was behind the counter, finishing small tasks that didn't need finishing, cleaning, straightening, delaying the moment he already knew was coming. Neither of them spoke at first, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything important already hung between them. Finally, she broke the silence. I keep thinking I should leave, she said quietly. Her voice didn't carry fear anymore, just confusion. Daniel looked up. He didn't answer immediately. He never rushed her words. She continued, slower. Now, but every time I try to picture it, I don't feel relief. A pause. I feel empty. That word lingered in the room. Empty. She turned slightly toward him. I don't understand that, she admitted. Daniel stepped away from the counter, stopping near the center of the room again. not close enough to pressure her, not far enough to disappear. "That's because you've been surviving long enough," he said gently. "Not living long enough." Her breath caught slightly at that because it was true. Too true. She looked down at her hands. "They're still looking for me," she said. "I know," he replied. There it was again, no surprise. No panic, just awareness? That steadiness almost made her laugh again, but it came out broken instead. "I can't drag you into this," she said. Daniel shook his head once. "You didn't drag me," he said. "I chose to stand here." That made her go still. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt different now, not tense, not heavy, but honest. She finally looked at him properly. Not like a stranger anymore, not like a rescuer, but like someone she had started to understand in pieces she didn't expect to recognize. "I don't know what I am to you," she said softly. Daniel hesitated. Then, without looking away, he answered, "You're someone I didn't expect, and didn't want to lose once I met you." The honesty of it hit harder than anything before. No grand declaration, no dramatic confession. Just truth, simple, unfiltered, her eyes lowered slightly. Because that was the most dangerous thing anyone had said to her in a long time. Not run, not stay, but matter. She swallowed hard. "I don't know how to be that for someone," she admitted. Daniel's voice softened even more. "You don't have to be anything yet," he said. "Just be here." A silence followed. But it wasn't uncertain anymore. It was deciding. Outside, the night wind moved gently through the empty street like the world itself was giving them space. She took a step forward, then another, not rushed, not afraid. Just choosing not to run, she stopped a few feet from him, close enough to feel his presence fully, far enough to still turn away if she needed to. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "If I stay, I don't know what happens next." Daniel nodded slowly. "Neither do I," he said. That should have been terrifying. But it wasn't. For once, uncertainty didn't feel like danger. It felt like possibility. She exhaled shakily. Then, almost like she was afraid of the answer, but more afraid of never asking, she said, "Why me?" Daniel didn't hesitate. He looked at her for a long moment, then answered simply, "Because when you walked in that night, you looked like someone who had forgotten what it feels like to be chosen." That broke something inside her. Not loudly, not painfully, softly, like a door finally unlocking after years of pressure. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "I don't want to run anymore," she whispered. Daniel didn't move too fast, didn't close the distance too quickly. He just nodded, like he had been waiting for that exact sentence without forcing it. "Then don't," he said, a pause. "And stay," the word landed gently, not like a demand, like an invitation. She closed her eyes for a brief moment,